The room sparkled with chandeliers and diamonds, every guest dressed to impress. Laughter echoed, champagne glasses clinked. But at the edge of the dance floor, a woman in a janitor's uniform stood invisible to the crowd. She wasn't part of their world. She was there to clean it. Her little girl clung to her side, eyes wide with wonder. No one noticed them, until the billionaire paused mid-step. In that moment, everything changed. What could make a man who refused to dance suddenly cross the floor toward a janitor's daughter? Ethan Grayson was the kind of man who made headlines without trying. Billionaire investor, philanthropist, and heir to an empire older than himself. His presence commanded attention wherever he went. People whispered that he had everything: money, charm, and influence. But at the annual Grayson Foundation Gala, he was known for one thing above all: never dancing. No matter the song, no matter the partner, Ethan kept his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the crowd. The ballroom. That night glittered like a scene from a dream. Celebrities mingled with politicians, each hoping for a moment in the billionaire's orbit. The string quartet played softly in the corner while waiters glided between tables. It was a world built on wealth and exclusivity, polished, perfect, and unwelcoming to those who didn't belong. In the far corner, away from the gold-trimmed tables and velvet ropes, stood Mariah. She was the hotel's night janitor, brought in to handle cleanup before the real mess began. Her uniform was plain, her sneakers worn. No one greeted her, no one offered her a drink. Beside her stood her daughter, Ava, 7 years old, her hair in neat braids, wearing a second-hand dress that swayed just above her ankles. Ava's eyes darted around the room, taking in the sparkling gowns, the towering cakes, the way the floor seemed to glow beneath the dancers' feet. She didn't understand why her mother stayed so still, why she wouldn't step closer. Mariah had learned long ago, this was not their space. They were there to work, not to be seen. Yet, unseen, or not, fate had other plans. Mariah kept her gaze fixed on the floor, broom in hand, sweeping crumbs from a party that had barely begun. Years of working behind the scenes had taught her how to fade into the background, how to move without interrupting the rhythm of people who never noticed her. But Ava was different. She didn't yet understand the invisible lines drawn between them and us. From across the room, Ethan Grayson spotted the little girl. He didn't know why she caught his attention. Maybe it was the way she swayed gently to the music, or the unguarded curiosity in her eyes. But as quickly as he noticed her, a whisper from his inner circle pulled his attention back. One of the guests, a woman in a pearl necklace, leaned toward him with a tight smile. "Don't mind her," she murmured. "Staff bring their kids sometimes. Just best to ignore it." The words slid under his skin, but Ethan said nothing. He'd been raised in a world where lines were drawn not just by money, but by skin, color, job titles, and the unspoken rules of keeping the atmosphere right. Tonight was no different. Ava, still clutching her mother's hand, spotted the marble dance floor. The music shifted, soft strings giving way to a lively waltz. She tugged at Mariah's sleeve. "Can we dance, Mama?" she whispered. Mariah smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Not here, baby. This isn't for us." But Ava didn't understand why. Her small feet in scuffed black shoes shuffled to the beat, drawing glances. A few guests frowned. One man chuckled quietly, muttering something under his breath that made his companions smirk. Mariah felt the stares, sharp, judging, reminding her of every time she'd been made to feel out of place. She tightened her grip on Ava's hand, ready to lead her away. That's when the music slowed. The crowd began encouraging Ethan to take the floor, as they did every year. It was a tradition, convince the untouchable billionaire to dance, even, just once. He gave his usual polite smile and shook his head. But then, mid-step toward the bar, his eyes caught Ava's again. There she was, still swaying, her small frame lit by the crystal chandeliers, moving as if the music belonged to her alone. And in that moment, something in Ethan shifted. The laughter, the judgment, the rules of the room, all of it blurred. A silence settled inside him, deeper than the music. He stepped forward, and the room noticed. Every head turned as Ethan crossed the gleaming dance floor, not toward the elegantly dressed socialites, but toward the janitor and her daughter standing near the shadows. Murmurs rippled through the room like a sudden chill. Glasses paused, mid-air. Even the musicians faltered for a beat before finding the rhythm again. Mariah froze. She had seen this before, not the approach of a billionaire, but the approach of trouble. Years of subtle and not-so-subtle reminders told her that being noticed in a room like this was rarely a good thing. She instinctively stepped in front of Ava, as though her presence alone could shield her daughter from whatever was coming. Ethan stopped just a foot away, his eyes not on Mariah, but on Ava. "May I?" he asked softly, holding out his hand. The silence was deafening. A woman near the stage scoffed audibly. Someone whispered, "Is he serious?" The tension in the air thickened, every unspoken prejudice pressing down on the moment. Mariah's heart pounded. She wanted to say no, to keep her daughter away from the sting of rejection she was sure would follow. But Ava, with the fearless honesty only a child could have, slipped her small hand into Ethan's. Gasps erupted as he led her to the center of the floor. The music swelled, and the two began to dance. Ava's tiny feet stepped carefully atop, his polished shoes as he guided her in a slow turn. The billionaire who never danced now moved with a child who, moments ago, was invisible. The stares around them weren't just of shock, they were of discomfort. The polished bubble of privilege had been pierced by something they couldn't ignore, the undeniable humanity of a moment shared between two people who society insisted should remain apart. When the song ended, the applause was hesitant, scattered. But Ethan didn't look away, neither did Ava. Ethan lifted Ava from the dance floor, her laughter echoing above the low hum of unsettled conversation. He walked her back to her mother, placing her gently on her feet. For a moment, his gaze met Mariah's, steady, unflinching. No words passed between them, but something unspoken did. An acknowledgement, a silent apology for the world they both knew too well. Mariah expected him to disappear back into the glittering crowd, retreating into the comfort of his world. Instead, Ethan turned to the microphone at the edge of the stage. The room quieted. "I've been to hundreds of galas," he began, his voice firm, "and I've met some of the most powerful people alive. But tonight, the most important dance of my life was with someone who reminds me what all this is supposed to be about: kindness, connection, and dignity." His eyes scanned the crowd, resting briefly on the guests who had frowned at Ava earlier. "If our wealth, our influence, or our gatherings can't make room for everyone, then they mean nothing." The applause that followed was cautious at first, then stronger. But not everyone clapped. Some sat stiff, their smiles frozen. Mariah didn't care. She felt Ava's small hand in hers, warm and secure. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to shrink to fit the space she was in. As Ethan returned to his table, the music started again, but the room felt different, like the air had shifted. People glanced at Mariah and Ava, some with newfound warmth, others with lingering judgment. But the moment had already done its work. The line between them and us had been crossed, even if just for a few minutes, and sometimes that's how change begins, not with a speech, not with a law, but with a single dance that refuses to be forgotten. So ask yourself, if you had the chance to step across that invisible line, would you take it?